Hey everyone. I hope you're enjoying email camp. Welcome to our special email camp edition of Notes from the Dev video edition. And today I have two awesome people to chat with. And that is Naomi West and Alice Lee from the Email Markup Consortium. If you have been following along, they formed a couple of years ago to make emails more accessible and better for everyone. Alice and Naomi, why don't you two just introduce yourselves real quick before we get into the questions?
Yeah, sure.
You go, Alice.
Okay, sorry. I'm Alice Lee. I'm an admin of the Email Markup Consortium. I've also been an email and UX engineer since 2007 at companies like Epsilon, Responsive, Litmus, Shutterstock, Squarespace, and currently I am a principal engineer on a design system team.
Amazing. My name's Naomi. I am currently a product marketing manager over at Parcel, which is part of the Customer.io family. I joined the Email Markup Consortium as an admin, what feels like maybe a year and a half ago. So I joined Alice and our two other founders, and I've been just absolutely loving kind of being able to share knowledge around the improvements that need to be made in the email space and why they should be made. And so I'm super excited to chat today.
Yay! These are like two of the smartest people I know. So this is like amazing. All right. So
go straight to my head if you keep saying those
yeah,
things.
well, you know. So let's just get straight into it, I guess. So let's talk about why the EMC sees accessibility as an incredibly important issue that it dedicates time and effort to. So, give us the lowdown of what's going on with the EMC.
Yeah. So when we ran our first accessibility report to gather kind of a state of affairs for what is the level of accessibility standardization across, I think at the time it was maybe 30,000 emails was the first report, or a little bit
somewhere around there, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around that number. When it came back with a 99.9% failure rate, that emails were presenting just absolutely atrocious accessibility issues, I think it became a glaring issue then that something was gravely wrong in the industry. And aside from accessibility being a basic human right, in my opinion, I think there's this piece of it that a lot of marketers, maybe you don't know what you don't know. So when I started learning about email accessibility, I was just like, oh my goodness, there's all these things that I had no awareness that I was doing wrong or could easily course correct. And I think, at least from my perspective, working with EMC, this is an opportunity that I have and the other admins have to create awareness and share that level of knowledge in the space. And then aside from that, I think in the next 5-10 years, we're going to start to see accessibility be a core requirement, similar to how it's becoming a core requirement on other digital channels. Alice?
Yeah, so when we try to pitch accessibility to, leadership or whatever, like at least, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, there used to be this attitude that they were like an edge case, population, and that we shouldn't be, necessarily spending too much time on making things accessible for a small percent of the population. But, this doesn't account for the fact that not everyone who uses accessibility tools with their emails are even necessarily like considered disabled or face like specific challenges. Some folks, and I've been known to do this myself, for example, might use like your MacBook voiceover feature to read your email out loud because it's sometimes just easier to listen to things than to read. And with voice-activated devices like Google Home, Amazon Echo, and even Siri becoming more popular, you're going to have like growing population of people who are reading their emails with screen readers or screen reader adjacent devices. So making emails accessible will make it naturally easier for anyone to read your emails. And not to mention, we are all only temporarily abled. We need to consider, as our digital native generations age, how we can all continue to access web-based information like email.
Yes, amazing. I can say something that I always bring up when I'm talking about accessibility is like my own abilities, and that like I wear glasses. I am like blind without these things on. And then cognitively with a lot of emails, how they visually look for me is incredibly important. And if I can even process the information, which is just, one of the reasons why an organization like this dedicating that time to accessibility is so important. Because if somebody who seems like just very like typical person is having issues sometimes, who else is having issues that maybe we can't even see?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think there's a study done by the World Health Organization that I frequently will cite in stuff like this, and they've reported that 10% of Americans live with some form of invisible disability. So to think that you're potentially creating a horrible experience for 10% of your audience and leaving 10% of your audience out by creating inaccessible content, it's huge, and it should be quite impactful if you look at it from the metrics standpoint.
Yeah, you're leaving a lot on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Like even just if you have somebody who's talking cold hard cash or something, like you're leaving a lot there by not taking this into account. So besides it being human rights issue, all that just
Yeah.
Cool. So we've been running, or the EMC's been running this study for 3 years now. I know the amount of emails has grown exponentially to over like 300 or 400,000 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't seen a lot of changes really. So how does that feel, and why do we think that's the case, that we haven't seen a huge change in the last 3 years?
From my standpoint, I mean, I feel sad. I feel sad seeing like the 99.9% come back, and it's like 99.999997%. Like it's a definite, like almost 100% of emails have some pretty big accessibility issues. I feel a moment of sadness. I feel a moment of disappointment that maybe as an organization and as marketers that care about accessibility, we're not doing enough to share how important this is. And I also have a moment of frustration that we are in a world where there is such little standardization of email output across different clients, how they ingest emails, different tools. They will shape your code differently. Some drag and drop tools don't make accessibility very aware, or they don't give you the opportunity to change certain aspects of your email. So you can be kind of marking off those checkboxes of I've assigned a language and a text direction. So I have a bunch of emotions. The last one is just more, I see continued opportunity every time we get this back, and I see continued learning. And when you combine those two, I think as an industry, we have a long way to go still. But if you look at it as kind of a positive, and we have an opportunity to shape this space a little bit more, I think it's okay. It's not okay that we're seeing this huge amount of failure, but I think the opportunity to create knowledge around this is something that kind of keeps me working towards this.
Yeah, definitely. Echoing a lot of the similar feelings. I feel like overwhelmingly like more motivated to get the word out, because like so many of these issues that are blocking emails from achieving like full accessibility are so easy to address. So we'll dig into that a little bit later, but like I just feel like, oh my god, we can get this done, guys. Let's just do it.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, when I talk about accessibility to people and they ask me where to start, I always say that if you are following good design principles, you're like 80% of the way there. And we'll get into that a little bit more too. I don't think a lot of it's as hard as people think it is, and they get overwhelmed really easily when it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to get started, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about it.
This metric too, like, isn't meant to make anyone feel bad about their campaigns, because 99.9997 or whatever of us land in this bucket. So I hope that when this report is, produced, it's not calling out that that people are doing something completely wrong. It's showing the opportunity that we have instead to improve. So if you've ever been wondering, like, how do I make my emails accessible? Go read the EMC report and just start to apply some of the learnings, like setting a language in your code and assigning a text direction, making sure that you have a level 1 heading. There's a lot of good knowledge that I think we can all apply immediately that don't require a technical point of contact or for our tool to make a change on our behalf.
I think if companies or email marketers just started adding alt text, they'd be knocking out a big chunk.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just such an easy, huge opportunity that people consistently miss.
Yes. Yeah. That one hurts.
Yes, for sure. There was Sarah Gallardo has really good stuff on alt text. And I actually read a thing from Dan Oshinsky recently about how he writes alt text, which I thought was interesting. And he said that he has started writing it like he is explaining a picture to a child, because that's what he does when he's reading. He has a baby. So when he's reading to the baby, like how he describes pictures, that's how he now writes his alt text. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because I definitely have been a person who has struggled with alt text before, because it's like, how much detail is too much detail? How is it not enough detail? So that's an interesting way to think about it. But yeah, I would go read what those two have said about alt text if you need a place to start. They have really great tips.
And even for like images that are purely decorative, like if you have like a border or something, you don't even need alt text for that. You just need, an alt attribute that's just empty. Yeah. That's
right. So the screen reader doesn't start doing like reading out the file name or something like that. And then you're hearing all this essentially like gunk, right? You don't need to hear. Yeah. Fun stuff. All right. So this caught me this year with the Email Markup Consortium, because to humble brag, each year my emails have been at the top of the list of most accessible. And this year they were not. And it was because of color contrast, which I found so interesting. So let's dig into this a little bit. Did you come out with any specific learnings by adding color contrast, or what was the thinking by adding color contrast to it? I'm just like really curious about this.
Yeah, so color contrast has, obviously been, well, maybe not obviously, but it's been one of our most requested features to put into our accessibility report.
Oh, interesting.
So not a huge surprise, but by adding it to our 2024 report, it increased the amount of non-accessible emails. Like, sorry, what happened to you, Megan? Because I mean, it makes sense though, because like the more rules there are to break. So, it did increase the number of inaccessible emails we collected. I think like we saw 17% of our emails that didn't pass color contrast. So what we learned from this was that it actually brought into focus specifically that how many links can't be distinguished from normal body text, because a lot of people just rely on color. And so like the color contrast bit of it is that if your link color doesn't contrast enough with your body text color, then that doesn't pass the color contrast.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking in terms of just your body text and your background, because like I was looking at my emails. I'm like, no, like this contrasts. This is good. But I will check those links against the body text and see how that contrast looks. I didn't think about that. That's super interesting. I learned something new. Yay.
Yeah, exactly. So like it is challenging, because like not only do you have to contrast the link with the body text, but then it all has to contrast against the background color. So that's like a lot of contrast happening. But like an easy way to address that is just to put like an underline in your links. So that way it makes it really obvious that a link is clickable, interactive. Other ways to make users more aware that they can interact with your clickable images and text links is to, add a hover effect on it. That way they get that instant feedback, like, oh, I'm hovering over this bit, I can click on it, which isn't always obvious. Like, again, if there's not enough color contrast, or like the only feedback oftentimes is like that mouse cursor just changing a little bit, and that's just so tiny in a lot of cases. So yeah, just as long as you make sure your links are underlined or have enough color contrast, which I think is like the higher bar to reach, you're all good.
And then there's the scary dark mode, which is also included in the color contrast checker, that I think a lot of people will be like, my email looks so good in light mode. And then dark mode is just lingering in the background. Like it's not accessible when dark mode takes over. So there's definitely lots of considerations. Like for me, I love dark mode. So I always am so sad when I receive an email and it's like completely illegible. I can't see anything at all. So you can't avoid dark mode. You have to take it.
You can't.
Yeah.
And have to make sure the emails are legible.
And then you have like your Outlooks and your Gmail apps where you can't control the dark mode. So that's when adding an underline to your links is even more important.
Yep, for sure. Naomi, in the parcel accessibility checker, does that check contrast of the links against the body text? Or is it just foreground and background?
It checks foreground and background. I'm not sure about links, but my understanding was it could be included in foreground and background checking. But I'll come back and I'll drop the answer in the chat at some point.
Awesome. That is very interesting. Now I have another thing to my to-do list to add to make my emails more accessible. All right, so we have lots of factors that you guys check. We've added criteria. Out of all that criteria, what do you think is most important for senders and brands to address and fix?
So I kind of touched on this before, but the cool thing is that the two most common and most critical things that you can fix are also the lowest hanging fruit, meaning it's like super easy. So the number one most common issue is that over 99% of emails don't have a dir attribute inside the body. So that's dir. That just means like direction, like text direction, like left to right or right to left. And the number two most common issue is like over 98% of all emails don't have a lang attribute that stands for language, for those who don't know, inside their body tag. Not even just like in the HTML tag, but you have to put it in a container within your body tag as well. So the dir attribute defines, like, as I mentioned, like your reading direction. The lang attribute defines the language that you are trying to like set your screen readers to read it in. Because like if you have a Spanish email, for example, and you have like hola, and a lot of people's like default screen reader pronunciations is like in English, so they might pronounce it holla, and you wouldn't want that to happen. So we at the EMC consider both of these issues in the serious severity tier, which is like a P1 level importance for those who are familiar with that, which is only one level below like P0, which is like absolutely you need to stop everything you're doing and address this. So it's pretty big. And as I mentioned before, this is a super easy solve. You can just throw both of these into your biggest container just inside your body tag. And especially if you have templates, you can just set it and forget it. Or if you're sending to multiple languages, just make sure you have the correct variables in it to set the correct reading direction and language. Otherwise, the only other like critical or P0 issue in our top 10 most common accessibility issues is, and we mentioned this earlier, the lack of alt attributes in images. Even if it's a decorative image, as I mentioned before, that doesn't need alt text, you need your alt attribute with an empty, like just 2 quotation marks in it to prevent screen readers from, as Megan said, reading out the entire URL path, which I think we can all agree is not an ideal user experience. And just anecdotally, we at EMC have noticed that a big culprit that causes this lack of alt attributes tends to be your default like image tracking pixels, for example. Those are really easy to miss because a lot of email developers aren't looking at them all the time. They might have them like programmatically inserted after they're done developing, or maybe they don't even have the ability to necessarily alter it. So if you're not able to get into your template and add an alt attribute to your tracking pixels, then definitely recommend working with your vendors and those customer service folks to try to get that in there.
Yes, that is. I feel like that's I don't want to say critique, a piece of feedback I feel like is heard a lot when this report comes out, is that those tracking pixels get added in by the ESP after the fact. So we can't, there are things here that so far we have not been able to control at all. So it's definitely something that we all need to try to work towards to fix.
Yeah. The one thing that I would love to see senders fixed more, and I come from this as like the marketer, like what can I control myself? And it is the requirement of needing a level 1 heading in your campaigns. I see so many emails sent out and like everything is just a paragraph text or not even semantic. It's just like in a div. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like, are you a paragraph? Are you H1?
Yep.
Are you H2? So the lack of semantics in an email pains me. And it's so easy just to put a level 1 heading. I want to say like 80% of the emails I receive have a level 1 heading, but 99.9% of them probably don't have them actually declared as a heading in the code. So it's a super easy fix, in my opinion.
Yeah, and even if you don't have like the resources to put like semantic H1, H2, H3 tags everywhere, and I definitely encourage you to do so if you can. A super easy fix for that would be to wrap your logo in a H1 tag and then set like margins to 0, and there it is. Your logo is your header tag.
There you go. Yeah, I always find it interesting too with people who are using more drag and drop editors because of the WYSIWYG. Oftentimes when they have paragraphs, they're separated by those breaks instead of doing the separate paragraphs. So it would be interesting to me to either try to push the editors to make it easier to make the HTML semantic, or you go to the people making those emails and you say, learn some very, very basic HTML, which are basically just your paragraph elements and your header elements, and have them go into the little code editor part and put them in, which I don't know how many people would actually do that. But I feel like if we could come up with a solution for that, it would probably also knock out a lot of the semantic issues too. Whenever we talk about this stuff, I'm always thinking about, okay, like the developers can control a lot of this, but what do we do when you're working with the email marketing specialist who is not a coder, because they are writing and testing and putting in the email and sending it out, and they have to do 50 of them in a month. So that would be interesting to try to find that solution, in my opinion. All right. So I believe this may be our last question. What's the best way for someone to be an advocate for email accessibility in their organization? I feel like this is a great one to leave people with.
It is, yeah. I think I love to yell internally whenever there is a problem. I am yelling about it. I am yelling until the cows come home. And it can get annoying, I'm sure, but if you can yell about why something is a problem and then the business impact, I think you have an opportunity to show what percentage of your audience you're leaving out when you're not prioritizing accessibility issues, and then tying that back to the business impact. If I say to, my team, hey, we have this accessibility issue that could be potentially impacting 10 to 15% of our audience, and this is crazy to potentially leave 10 to 15% of our audience on the table. It's not only a horrible user experience, but would you really be okay with me excluding 10 to 15% of my audience for a holdout test, which is a very common marketer practice that is somehow completely, people are like, that's kind of a big number. Can you make it like 1% instead? Like, they don't want you to leave out a percentage of your audience. So I would encourage you to yell. I would encourage you to talk to people in the industry. If you notice that your tool in some capacity that you're using is prohibiting you from passing some of these accessibility checks, right into the tool, right? Again, with these platforms, you don't know what you don't know. And all it takes is more discussion and more awareness around what some of these issues are and what they then equate to, aka bad user experience, to start some of the discussions, which will hopefully drive change.
Yeah, definitely co-signed with that. Educate, 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 also socialize. I'm surprised we haven't brushed up on this before, but like a lot of folks are really motivated by when they hear about the legal ramifications of lack of accessibility, like posting articles about, oh, so-and-so company just got sued because their website was inaccessible, can like light a fire under the butts of some people to actually start taking it seriously. So definitely like share articles like that whenever you hear about it. Also sharing with your team resources like webinars, other like how-to things where they can like learn about how easy it is to make emails accessible actually. But also sharing your email accessibility wins when you achieve them. So like I said earlier, just throwing those 2 pieces of code into your template can easily fix like the top 2 severe issues we've seen in emails. So doing that and letting your team know about that super easy win is like another amazing way to be an accessibility advocate and start like building that excitement on your own team and finding your own people at your org to like kind of band together and be passionate about accessibility with.
Love it. I co-sign, and I don't think I personally have anything else to add. That was amazing. So why don't you both, Alice, you can start off. Let us know where we can find you if any questions, connect, and whatnot.
Yeah, so my website is alicelee.codes. That's ALICELI.CODES. And on there, you can find all my related socials where you can contact me and keep tabs on me.
And you can find me, similar website spiel here. I have a website, naomiwest.ca, and I am still hanging on to Twitter for dear life.
Me too.
Email Naomi is where you can find me on Twitter, and the same handle for Instagram as well if you ever want to chat email.
And sign up for Naomi's newsletter, Slow Emails. It's really great. I love it.
Infrequent, and it goes against all my morals as a marketer that preaches a predictable cadence.
Totally fine. It's a delightful surprise when it hits my inbox. Yeah. I'm like, yes, Naomi sent another email. Go, Naomi.
It's only been 6 months. It's more frequent.
Yeah, it's definitely more frequent than that. I'm on the list. It comes in about once a month. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, that's it for us. If you have any questions, throw them into the chat. We'll pop in and answer what we can. And have fun at the rest of email camp.
Thanks all.